How important is mindset for weightlifting? When should you reset your training maxes? And how many days a week should a beginner train when learning the Olympic lifts? We answer all of these questions in today's video, and if you want your questions answered, then make sure to leave a comment with your question down below. All right, so question number one, how to know when to increase my training maxes. So this is a kind of a tricky question because I don't know if this is the case for you guys, but we don't have training maxes. We just have maxes for our stuff. Now, I base that off for all of my lifts, but I know you guys will do some other stuff for your strength work. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, first, I think it's important to know like what your coach wants from your program. Some programs are actually written for a using a like new max goal. Most programs, I would say, are written to use with your current max. For instance, I'm starting one of my athletes on like a modified Russian squat program, and he's on week 2 right now. But that kind of looks like it starts off week 1, 6x2 at 80%. Week 2, 6x3 at 80%. 6x4, 6x5, 6x6 at 80%. It's kind of expected that you probably couldn't do that 6x6 at 80% on the first week, but it's definitely not expected on week 8, I believe it is, when you're doing I believe it's it's like a 3, it's a 6x3, or no, it's a 4x3 at like 95%. Or something. It's a 3x3 at 95%. That's like totally something you wouldn't be able to do at the start of a program. That's assuming your max went up.
Right.
So you're still using that old max. You're not using like an estimated new one throughout that program. So it's important to know like when you're supposed to increase it. Like usually like what you do is you're using your actual max or your best estimation of what it is in that moment at the start of the program. Like I think that's kind of how it should be. We will use it sometimes for the Olympic lifts. That's really when we're dialed, we're peaking weightlifting. Our maxes are accurate to that moment. If I'm using my 121 snatch max and I am really in the off season and I'm kind of detrained, it's probably not a very good. That'll inflate those percentages a lot. So 80% could even be my 95% if I'm in the off season and I'm not peaked for weightlifting at that moment. Same thing goes with some of the strength work, although usually we're just using a solid percentage year round with that strength work. And you said you just are using their actual maxes. How often are you retesting those?
So it depends on the group. With our like online team programs, we're retesting maxes about every 12 weeks or so. For the strength stuff, we usually will do every 16 weeks. But this training cycle, actually, we're stepping away from that like need to retest to give a little bit more time to see if we can just allow athletes to like build a base and not necessarily have to deal with the fatigue of retesting and how that could impact your Olympic lifts.
Yeah.
So we're actually retesting the strength lifts less often now and more just seeing if we can find other markers of whether strength increased or not. So like if your 5 rep max goes up, or if your 5x5 weight can increase, things like that. Or can you do weights that you can pause it now for a triple where you couldn't have paused that last training cycle, like that kind of approach for our strength lifts.
Yeah.
And then for our Olympic lifts, we retest a little bit more often, partially because we know that there's going to be a little bit more turnover with lower price programs like what we have. So I'm a big fan of doing retests like every training cycle, which would be about 12 to 16 weeks. And with some of my lifters a lot of them are a little bit more in that beginner phase, they may be retesting, like resetting a max every 4 weeks or so, just because nothing that they do is an accurate max because they're continuously getting stronger. So they're still getting all those beginner gains.
Totally.
Yeah.
I'll kind of bring to the table like 2 pretty different perspectives that I'm super familiar with. Because one of those is going to be my Lindenwood perspective and how we train at Lindenwood, and the other is going to be from living with Hampton Morris and his coach and dad Trip Morris, and what they do with him that got him to winning an Olympic bronze medal. So I'll start with our Lindenwood perspective. We kind of have a metaphor we use, which is called digging up the seed. So when you're thinking about retesting a max, whether that is Olympic lift or strength lift, you don't want to always be digging up that seed. What that means is, like, when you're gardening, like, you don't just plant the seed and a week later check it and see if you got a whole potato, you know? You got to let it grow. You got to let the program, aka, the water, the sunlight, the soil, give its nutrients to it and let it grow. Then you harvest it when it's ready. But if you're always trying to harvest it, it's never going to grow, Now that's our linenwood perspective. We definitely take a more long-term, like, single meet a year peak strategy. With a guy like Hampton, he has a lot of meets that he has to be in good shape for every year. And he's going heavy, testing basically, he could test essentially whenever it feels good. If he's moving really, really good on a day, he could max his snatch on any day.
Mm-hmm.
Is kind of how it seemed. Little different for clean and jerk. Like, a lot of times he's limited by a variation of some way.
Right.
A little bit the same in the snatch, but like a heavy snatch won't fatigue you the same way a heavy clean and jerk will.
Yeah.
So he gets a little more leeway in the snatch. In those heavy clean and jerks, so it might be like he's limited by having 3 cleans in front of the jerk.
Yeah.
Or he's limited by doing 2 cleans, 2 jerks, or
right.
It's pretty simple stuff. It's nothing too crazy, right? But he could work up to a maximum on that variation, like at least like once a week on that variation, and then maybe it's a different variation the next day. Like, he's essentially doing max hang snatches on another day. But the whole point being is, like, I'm talking with Tripp, I'm like, hey, he can go heavy so often because he's trained for so long. And Tripp says, well, no, we've had him doing this the entire time. Like, this is how he's always trained. Because he wants to be good at weightlifting, not be in the off season. He wants to be good at weightlifting.
Yeah.
Like, year round. Like, otherwise, why are we doing weightlifting? So it's kind of a different perspective, different take on it. I will say Hampton takes quite a lot of care and attention into his recovery. I think that really helps him, especially his diet as well too, helps him to be able to do a training system like that. He has a lot of money, a lot of time put into physical therapy, body work, massages, that kind of stuff too. Just keeping him at that top level, peak performance, kind of year round as well. Able to go heavy so often. So that's like the difference I see is like for us regular people that aren't full dedicated weightlifting is my job. You don't want to test as often. You don't want to be going heavy as often. If you are Mr. Weightlifter, this is all you're doing. You don't have a lot of other things that are fatiguing you in your life, like a job, like, if you are just living the weightlifting life, you can go a lot heavier, probably a lot often. That's kind of my takeaway from that.
Yeah. I think sometimes it depends on the person. Like, you almost have to find what works well for you as an athlete. Like, if for some reason you just tend to recover pretty well from heavier training, then maybe that's just what works better for you. And then for other people, if, a heavy training session really beats you up, then you might just respond better to like more of a 1 or 2 training peaks a year and not retesting quite as much and just building up a base of volume and strength throughout the year.
That's really important to think about as well. Hampton is a 61 kilo weightlifter.
Yeah.
He's a tiny guy. He's small.
Yeah.
Smaller athletes, lighter weighing athletes, have less literally physical mass that their body needs to recover.
Yeah.
A guy like Lasha, it's the reason his maximum weights look almost effortless too. He's only hitting those a very, very small portion of the year. Whereas Hampton might be doing these near maximum attempts, like I would say he's hitting above 95%. Like, leading up to the Olympics, when I was training with him on clean and jerk, he would take at least a couple attempts in the clean and jerk above 95% every week.
Wow.
And in the snatch, more than a couple. I would say he's taking like 10, like above 95% attempts a week.
Wow.
Uh, Lasha is not. Lasha probably has taken 10 above 95% attempts like in the last like quad.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's how much he's doing. It takes so much to recover a 400-pound body compared to a 130-pound body.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like so that's a big difference you'll notice with bigger athletes just cannot handle as much volume. They can't handle as much intensity. The same with women a little bit too. That there is some gender differences in that women can usually take more volume and recover more quickly than a guy, and that can also relate with muscle mass. Like usually a 64 kilo woman weightlifter versus a guy who weighs 64 kilos. The guy likely has more muscle mass, just because that's how men and women are a little different sometimes. Usually women have higher body fat.
Yeah.
So so at the same weight, less muscle.
Exactly. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So sometimes it's so we don't get too off track with the like training max thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes like experimenting around to see kind of what style of programming you respond well to. But sometimes if you're doing training maxes, it's one of those things that like catches my ear that I don't hear often in weightlifting, where it sounds a little bit more like a powerlifting, kind of like a early 2000s kind of powerlifting approach, where people would have like, you'd pick a program and then you would estimate your 1 rep max, or base what you want your 1 rep max to be, and people would build programs like they would plug that in, and then it would spit out all their percentages for the whole 12 weeks or whatever it was, based off of that, and then people would update their training maxes when they saw like positive indicators that things were going well, where that like just doesn't really exist in weightlifting. We part of it being a sport is that you have to test your maxes at some point for the sport, and so you retest your training maxes when it makes sense in your training program, which means that you're either peaked for it, prepared for it, or you start hitting weights that weights for a double that you couldn't do the previous training cycle, or if you hit a PR double, probably a pretty good indicator that a PR single is coming around the corner. If you start seeing leading indicators that a max is probably going to go up, then you might want to start planning for it. Maybe start touching a heavy single for 2 or 3 weeks leading up to the week that you maybe want to retest.
Totally.
Yeah.
Another kind of idea related to that, we talk about maybe the difference a little bit between that powerlifting program with the training maxes and the weightlifting program. You'll probably be able to test your Olympic weightlifting, snatch and clean and jerk maxes more often than anybody would ever be able to test their squat, bench, or deadlift maxes.
Yeah.
Like doing a truly max peak squat is a rare occasion. It's like you're not at that peak squatting shape, and the same goes for training the squats and weightlifting. And really, like, we're maxing our front squat and we're maxing our back squat about once a year at Lindenwood.
Wow.
Each once a year, and they happen at different times throughout the year as well. It's not in 1 week. So what that kind of looks like, basically, we're taking the least specific variation that's happening the furthest away from our competition. Mm-hmm. Our competition that we view as important. For us, it's university nationals. So we bring the whole team. We try to win the national championship. So the least specific strength variations for weightlifting are going to be the clean deadlift and the bench press are the 2 strength variations we use that are the least specific. Mm-hmm. So we're doing a 9-week cycle, going through 3 weeks of 5s, 3 weeks of 3s, 3 weeks of 1s on each of those. And each of them has an AMRAP once a week in that.
As like a drop set?
Essentially, like we'll do a little volume. It might be 3 sets of 5, then an AMRAP at that same percentage.
Oh, okay.
And then, so that's kind of really building up a lot of strength in this movement, but it's far away. The deadlift, if you're doing it in season during peaking season of weightlifting, is not going to be helping your Olympic lifts very much. Yeah. The front squat will. That's why we do it leading into our big competition. That's why we're doing those AMRAPs on the front squat leading into that big weightlifting competition.
Hmm.
So what we think about there, um, these squats, like, yes, having a higher squat helps you in weightlifting, but not simply by having a higher squat. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter for your, like, obviously you have to be able to squat a weight to even possibly Olympic lift it in some sort of way. Like, if you can't squat 60 kilos, well, you're not going to be snatching 60 kilos, I'll tell you that. Um, but there's a lot more nuance in that. So what we think about is, like, you want to be, it's about the speed you can move a certain weight at.
Hmm.
So in the pull of the snatch or the clean, you have to move it at a certain speed to get enough height on it to get under it.
Yeah.
Now, some people are really good. They don't need that. They only need, that much height on a clean to be able to get under it or something, right? Because they're so fast under. But you still need a certain amount of speed to be able to achieve this height. Um, and so same goes for in the jerk dip. You need to have a certain amount of speed to complete a jerk. It's different for everyone. But whole point being, it doesn't matter what that max weight is, that super high max squat number that takes 4 seconds for you to grind it out. What matters is how fast you can move a certain percentage. So say I squat 210 kilos. Well, let's call it 200 to make it easy. And my 75%, 150 kilos, I can move really fast. Like, I can move that really fast. Well, I can probably clean and jerk that weight if it's moving fast enough. Take another athlete. Maybe they have a 200 kilo squat as well, but it's like a 4-second grind. It's like super, super hard. Their 150 kilos, also their 75% is a lot slower than mine, for instance, maybe. Are they more likely to clean and jerk it? No, not at all. They're much less likely to be able to clean and jerk a certain weight if you can't move it fast enough.
Yeah.
So really thinking about, like, do you need to really test that squat if you see your speed moving up at a certain amount of percentage? Maybe not. Maybe you just know that it's moving up. And using, like, those AMRAPs like we were talking about can help you estimate, especially if it's under 10 reps. If you have an AMRAP set of 7, 6, 5, that's a really good estimation of what your current 1 rep max would probably be.
Yeah, and the higher up the reps go, the less accurate that, especially like if you're using one of those like rep calculators or something like that, the less accurate that's going to get. But that makes a lot of sense. I just posted a video on this exactly the other day, not exactly on this topic, but I covered it as, like, yeah, a big squat is good, but a big fast squat is better, especially for weightlifting.
Yeah, like one thing I noticed between like me and my teammate Adam, like, I think we maxed out our squat at the same. It was the same, like 100 or it was 206 kilos. We had on a max out day we had, but Adam's is a lot slower than mine, and you can see that kind of reflect in some of his Olympic lifts as well, with his speed after the hip, and speed in the squats of the clean and stuff. So even though we tested at the same max, like, mine moved a lot faster. We actually had a bar tracking velocity tracker on it as well.
Mm-hmm.
I believe my max moved at like 0.8 meters per second, which is like crazy
What?
quick.
That's insanely fast.
And then yeah, like I'm the kind of athlete where then I add 5 kilos and it's like, nope, not happening.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
Yeah, but Adam's like peaks, and this is peak speed. This isn't the average speed.
It's not the okay.
So that might, like, my average
speed throw it off.
My average speed is like probably like 0.5 or 0.4 on that max or something like that.
That's still pretty fast.
Yeah, we didn't measure it, so that's just kind of a guess. But yeah, Adam's peak was probably near where my average was or whatever.
That's
and Adam, if you're watching this, sorry for using you as an example, but yeah.
we'll call him Adam.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting. When we did some bar speed testing at the summer training camp, and we tracked the average. The reason that he gave us was that with the peak, a lot of the time on the squat, people will, like, be super grindy through the whole thing and then just lock out really fast, and the bar will, like, that will measure the peak, and it's a false assessment of, like, how fast was the actual squat,
Yeah.
But that would be interesting. Like, even if you guys have different peak velocities at the top, and you guys are both like really like being aggressive in the lockout, that still might make a lot of sense as far as your speed under the bar, because it's kind of the same position as like a power position a little bit in the last half, like top quarter of the squat.
Another issue we kind of had using that peak velocity was once the girls would get above like
Oh, the bar whip.
kilos, it would measure the velocity of the bar whipping
Yeah.
instead of the actual velocity of their moving of it.
Yeah.
So you would see somebody's velocity increase as they got heavier, like significantly.
Yeah. Because that bar
Where,
was bouncing real quick.
yeah, where like at like 200 kilos in the men's bar, you're not gonna have like enough whip really to do that kind of thing. We saw it happening more at like 220, 230, 240. You started to have some more whip on there, where we saw some of our men's numbers, like James squatting 265 or 270, like kind of couldn't use the data from his stuff. That was tough, but that's something that now our lab researchers know better, so it's cool.
Yeah. Well, I think we fully covered the training maxes thing pretty in depth. So just to reiterate a little bit, either retesting your program a little bit more often if you need to, or stick to the program and only retest whenever it makes sense to do that. You can retest once you start to see some like leading indicators improving, like AMRAP sets are increasing, bar speed is increasing on squat work, or if you're hitting PR doubles on a regular basis, or something for like a variation that's usually a good sign. Like if a block snatch, usually some people will hit like a PR block snatch, and then a couple weeks out after that they'll hit a snatch from the floor. Like that was Kate and I, or Kate Vibert's her main strategy the last couple competitions. It seemed like she would always hit a PR block snatch, and then she would hit a PR snatch from the floor like 2 weeks later. So some of those like leading indicators can help with that. But yeah, and then was there anything else on that one?
No, I think we covered it quite a bit. Yeah.
Sweet. Okay, so question number 2: how important is mindset in weightlifting? This one is I'm pretty excited about it because it's a broad question, and first I didn't know where to start with this because it's like, oh, very important, cool, end of question. But I after sitting with it for a little while, I kind of came to this idea about like 4 tiers of mindset in weightlifting, and then I talked to you about them beforehand. You said that your coach has the exact same thing, which is funny because we have never talked before. But it's kind of cool. So here's kind of how I set this up and think about it a little bit in my brain. So tier 1 would be going to the gym, like having the mindset and the discipline to decide to go to the gym, just on a regular basis. That's the basics. That's where like most people still will probably never get to. And that's the difference between, your people who don't really have a plan when they go to the gym. They don't really know what days they're going. It's just not a part of their routine and their schedule. That's tier 1. Tier 2 would be having the discipline or the mindset to think that you may not be the leading expert on weightlifting, and that it might be a good idea to find a coach or to follow a training program. And that would be like the next best thing, because once you're regularly going to the gym, then the only thing that's really going to make you progress is following some sort of progression, right? A training program.
Totally.
This can be kind of tough for a lot of people. I think for some it's tough to admit that you may not know everything. I find this a lot more with like dudes who just want to like do their own thing because it's been working. But if you've been lifting the same weights for like a year, it hasn't been working. So that would be tier 2, is finding a coach and sticking with a program for, I would say, even an extended period of time. Because I think it's easy for people to purchase a program and then be like, cool, that I did it, I am now strong. But you actually have to follow the program and stick to it. And when you first start out, that may just mean like following the program and doing exactly what it says. And then the next time around, coming back to it and making sure that you don't skip
out on the accessories once or twice a week. It's how disciplined can you be to stick to your program and to communicate with your coach and things like that. So that would be tier 2. Tier 3 is when we start changing your lifestyle outside of the gym. So, if you're sticking to a training program, you're seeing good progress, that's great. There's a whole lot more progress that you can unlock by doing a few things outside of the gym. So that would be managing your nutrition, managing your sleep, and then any additional recovery things that you can do outside of that. So I think when people get into weightlifting, they just want to like go ham, go as hard as possible. You can still see some progress from that. But the moment that you start like changing your life to support your training a little bit more, where you're making sure that without a doubt you are always getting 8 to 9 hours of sleep every single night and high quality sleep, and that you are tracking your protein and you're getting enough protein and calories in every day, and you're timing your meals so that when you have them you feel really great in training. That is the kind of stuff that's really going to help take your training to the next level, because at the end of the day, like, a program's a program. You can stick to it 100% to a T and be better and more disciplined in your training than anybody else. But if you're not fueling up for that training, you're not going to be able to perform as well. Like, just that's it. If you're not sleeping 8 to 9 hours a night, you are just not going to be performing as well. It is just a fact. And so if you can get your life to revolve around it, even in small ways like sleep and like timing your meals, you'll be a much better weightlifter. So that would be tier 3. And then tier 4 for me is having the discipline to know when not to go ham in training all the time. I think it's kind of an indicator of an undisciplined mind when somebody is always having to take 8 attempts at a lift that they don't really need to that day, because if you missed it, you probably aren't gonna hit it, and taking 8 cracks at it, especially on something like a squat or like a clean and jerk, you're just beating your body into the dirt, when maybe honestly if you just rested a little bit and made sure to sleep a little bit better the next night, you probably come back next week and hit it just fine. But then you aren't disciplined with your approach, and you start taking too many attempts and missing too many attempts in training, and you're following the program but you're also going off program after your prescribed sets or whatever for the day. You're not going to get nearly as many gains. And then along with that, like, even if you're feeling great in your training, and you can stick to the program and you're not taking multiple attempts, but maybe you're starting to get a little bit older and your knee is bugging you or your shoulder is causing you issues, knowing that it's okay to put off and not do some of the training that's on there because it's going to make things worse, so that you can better recover and hit training hard the next week or stay training for a longer period of time. I think that's a level of discipline that it kind of shows a little bit more maturity in an athlete, in my opinion. So those are the 4 tiers that I have, but did you guys want to go over the 4 tiers that you have for it?
Yeah, I think ours are pretty similar. The big difference, I would say, is that I'm probably switching your tier 3 and tier 4.
Yeah.
I'm probably swapping those, because essentially tiers 1 through 3, I think, happen all inside of the gym. Like, you have to get all your stuff right inside of the gym. I mean, obviously, doing that stuff outside of the gym, the sleep, the eating, is going to benefit anybody at any point. I think that's the 4th thing people unlock. I think the outside of the gym is the last one. I would argue that the taking dumb attempts in training, going off program type thing, is even more fundamental than the outside of the gym.
Yeah.
Now, what's going to get you more progress? Probably really focusing hard on that outside of the gym stuff, even if you are being a dummy in training and taking 10 attempts at a new clean and jerk PR, even though it's not even close.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would argue that, like, that in the order of how you unlock things, like kind of the stage of weightlifting you're in. That
yeah. I actually, now that you put it that way, it's got me thinking. I think I'm thinking a little bit differently. I think I want to make that 4th tier not so much the not taking dumb attempts and doing that kind of stuff, because that does seem like a little bit more of a tier 2 thing, like stick to the
Yeah.
program, do it well. I think it's more on the side of the
Trusting the program, buying in. Is that?
more on knowing when it's smarter not to do something, even though it's what is written. Right, like, you know, if I've for example, I've got an athlete who she like was doing some CrossFit stuff, and she thought it was going to be a chill workout, and she hurt her shoulder a little bit. We're a couple weeks out from competition, so you know she's going into her heavy day of training, her first couple of heavy total days, and you know she hurt her shoulder. She's doing fine most of the time. Sometimes it bugs her on the jerk, and so if she misses one of her 3 prescribed singles at 90% or whatever, the smart thing to do if you've got an injury is to not do that lift again, not push it. Live to train another day and know that like you still put in all the work for the weeks before. And so that's where I think this 4th tier is like knowing when it's smarter to kind of listen to your body a little bit more, even though it is different than what was prescribed as far as the workouts go.
Yeah, true. Or like another application of that might be, I remember going into the Arnold this year. We had a Lift for Life gym, the lab gym, training in there with us on a heavy Friday. And I was having a really good day in the clean and jerk. My jerks were moving like they never had before. And I remember talking to Jimmy, Coach Jimmy from the lab. And you know, he's been to so many international meets with his younger kids. He coaches mindset more than anybody, I think. Like everything to him is like a life lesson. Like it's not like he's just teaching you technique. It's like he's teaching you a life lesson. And you know, I'm talking to him about my clean and jerk and stuff. He's like, "Yeah, I seen the last one. Like you just need to get it to your hip. You'll be good. Like just come on now." You know, he kind of gave me some sort of speech that hyped me up. He's recording the video for the new 150 clean and jerk PR, and it's like the best clean and jerk above like 135 I had done that whole cycle. It's like the most amazing clean and jerk. It looked like it was 80%. And I'm like super hyped. And I'm like, so should I go up? Like, he's like, no, like don't, like, I mean, this doesn't like change what you're going to open at next week. This doesn't change like that kind of stuff. Like, leave it for the platform. Like, don't get some extra fatigue now, or and you know you're gonna hit this lift. You know, you post it on Instagram. What if you look like a bozo, but when you go out on the competition platform, if you made 155 today, then you go out next week and miss 153, 154, 155. Like, what are you, a training warrior? You know?
Yeah.
Some people would really argue that that's dumb. That you need to, if it's there, you need to strike when it's hot. But in the end of the day, what matters? The numbers at your competition or the numbers that you do in training?
Yeah. I mean, it really, I think that the only person that can really answer that is like you and your coach. You have to know like what's going to be the best for you. And some people are really great at just building momentum. And then some people are like, I need to hit a PR to know that I can hit this on stage.
Yeah.
And I think that's I think that is just a difference in like training philosophy as a whole. Are you more of somebody who hits big lifts in training and then does whatever you need to in competition to win? Because that was how my coach was. He was like, I want a PR wherever possible, and that is it. Like the only thing that matters to me is PRs, and then you do whatever you need to in competition to win. And if that means setting up PR, great. But if that means that you only need to hit 80% of what you've done in the gym, then awesome as well. And then other people have the complete opposite approach. And they're like, I'm going to build so much of a base in training that it is unreasonable that I would not be able to hit a PR in competition. And that's what matters the most to me is hitting the lift in comp, and that's all that matters. And if you're training for the sport of weightlifting, then that is absolutely the case.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's totally. And we see both styles being very successful. Like, I wouldn't argue necessarily that one is better than the other.
Yeah.
Like I would definitely say like a guy like Hampton is taking that more Pendlay approach where it's, you know, if it's there, we're taking it. And maybe part of that is confidence, you know, having the confidence that you've done it before really can shift your mindset like quite a bit.
Yeah.
You got to coach the athlete, though. In the end of the day, like, you got to know if that athlete, like, does that affect them?
Hmm.
Like, does knowing that they hit that weight change their mindset? Like I know probably like a lot of like our, especially like I've seen this happen with some of our girls team. Like there was one athlete we were doing like a max out for a study that was through the lab, and I noticed that they had accidentally loaded on not it was supposed to be like her PR clean and jerk was like 101 kilos, um, or no, her PR was 102, and she's been training for really hard for like 4 or 5 years. She's pretty deep into weightlifting, and they were loading on what was supposed to be 100 kilos, and I noticed that the research lab people made a mistake. They were loading it like a men's bar.
Oh, so it was 105.
It was 105, not 100. I noticed this like as I'm taking the video for her, and I don't say anything. She thinks it's 100.
Yeah.
She hits it really easy. And
That's cool.
This is when we're not even peaked for weight. Like this is when we're not even doing like heavy clean and jerks in training. And it's just great. And I tell her, she's like, "What? What?" The researchers are like freaking out because their data's messed up or whatever. And not I like having the confidence that you can do something really does, like the perception of that weight and how much it weighs is it's almost more important than what it actually weighs, like in a way.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, all it is feel. Like, if it feels good and you don't know what the weight is, then it still feels good.
Yeah.
I love that. I would love to do like the trash bag study that I think it was Mike Stone did this, where you like put a trash bag over the weight so you can't tell what it is and see if you could figure out, see if you could set a PR just because you don't know what the weights are. And it was apparently very, very effective. I'd like to mess around with that. That'd be cool. But was there anything else that we wanted to cover on this one?
No, I think we're good there.
Sweet. Okay. So question number 3 is, how many days a week should a beginner do for weightlifting? So I usually like to be a little bit more on the lower end of side of things, because I think that most people honestly just have a hard time being consistent in the gym. So I like anywhere from 3 to 4 days a week for most beginners. And I want to see if they can show up and follow the program for 6 weeks straight, something like that, where we can get a really good progression in. So if you're doing 4 days a week, here's how I like to set it up. I like to do snatch and clean on one day and then some form of pull. So snatch, pull, or clean pull. And then the other day is clean and jerk. It's not as much emphasis on the clean, but mostly on the jerk. And then follow it up with squats. And that is the 4 day week split. So we go Monday is snatch and clean, and then snatch pull. Tuesday is jerks, and then back squats. And then rest a day or two. And then we've got Friday is snatch and clean again, and then clean pull. And then Saturday would be our jerks and then front squats. And that is a pretty solid like beginner training split. That's actually the training split that we use for the Weightlifting 101, the beginner program, which is free for anybody who's watching. You can get that at the link in the description below. That's the training split that I like. Now, if you're going to do 3 days a week, then I would recommend just doing snatch and clean and jerk every single session, and then have 2 days of pulls, 1 day of squats, and call it a day. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think like when you think about like training frequency, like you want to be snatching at least, you obviously want to be doing snatch, clean, and jerk separately or together at least once a week.
Mm-hmm.
Like otherwise, you're not doing weightlifting. Then expanding upon that, like it's better to do each of those twice a week.
Yeah.
Do you need to? I'm not necessarily certain that you need to do, a jerk twice a week or a snatch twice a week. If you were doing jerk and clean twice a week and then snatch once a week, that could work as well. Kind of depends what your weaknesses are. Really, though, if you're a beginner, this is all like a bunch of mumbo jumbo. This is like TV static in your ear right now, probably. You just need to pick up a program. Like, you need to follow something that someone else made that knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
Like, I tried to do it myself. Like I would go just like snatch when I felt good. Maybe it'd be 3 days a week one week, and then 1 the next, and then 0 the week after that or something, right? And it works for so long. It only works for so long.
Yeah.
And it would work better if it was planned out by someone who knew what they were doing.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and so like when we're thinking about like how to program for a beginner, the thing that I think is the most important to remember is that like as a beginner, you don't know how to do the movements. So you're more than likely not going to be able to lift enough weight to cause a significant amount of fatigue, though the traps and the shoulders may get beat up a little bit if you're not used to doing like a lot of shoulder or upper body work in general.
Yeah.
But if you are, then you'll probably be okay. So if that's the case, I think that there's not much of a better way to learn a skill than to just do it as frequently as possible. If you take, snatching and you're doing 10 sets a week, if you do 10 sets on one day, that's pretty good. But if you're doing 5 sets twice a week, that's going to be better because you don't have to relearn the movement quite as much. If you're doing 2 sets 5 days a week, I don't know if 2 sets would be enough, but you're still going in and practicing the movement every day. You don't have to relearn the movement every time. So I like frequency as a way to just get a skill down, especially if you're not using weights that are all that fatiguing for you, right? Maybe you just can't get into a good overhead squat yet. So you're doing a lot of empty barbell work to be able to improve the mobility to get in there. I think frequency is kind of an underlooked tool for a lot of beginners. But then it depends on the type of beginner that you are as well. If you're a complete beginner, then doing snatches 5 times a week is probably not going to be a great idea. Because an empty barbell might actually be fatiguing for you. Whereas if you're coming from like a strength background or an athletics background, then you could probably get away with doing it more because you have a base of strength and athleticism that's beyond what your skill is in the movement. So if we're doing that, then I think after the frequency, the next best thing is to follow a progression of some kind. So here's the progression that we do for the 6-week beginner program. We start week 1 with everything from the hip. So that means a hip snatch, a hip clean, and then for the jerk, I get people into splits as quickly as possible so that you don't have to like learn a push jerk and then try and figure out how to split jerk after that. Once you learn the split jerk, it kind of starts to click pretty easily. So we go a double pause jerk for the first 3 weeks. And then we start doing a slow dip jerk and then a normal jerk after that. For the snatch and the clean, we go hip snatch for week 1. Weeks 2 and 3 is a double pause snatch and a double pause clean where we're practicing start position, knee position, and returning back to that power position you practiced the week before. Then weeks 4 and 5 is a tempo, so just a slow pull. Once you've got your positions kind of dialed in and you're consistently hitting them, then let's see if we can be fluid from the floor to the power position and still have a good lift. And then week 6 is let's start doing some snatches and clean and jerks and see how they're feeling and if there's any significant breakdowns that happen. But a lot of the time, if you stick to that progression, especially if you've got a coach watching you, your technique's going to be pretty solid by week 6. And I know a lot of people may be a little bit quicker to get somebody to pulling from the floor. I found that a lot of time, if you just stick to this like 6-week progression, people will not have to make a lot of the same errors over and over again or be more inconsistent with what errors they're making. So it's kind of like that 4 stages of learning. I think I've got an article about this coming out soon. Where like in the beginning, you don't know what you're doing wrong. So you're making a lot of mistakes and they're different mistakes all the time too. If you follow this progression, a lot of time you'll make the same mistakes in week 1 and then you won't make those on week 2 anymore because you worked them out, right? And if you do the same mistakes for week 2 and 3, by week 4, you're not making those mistakes because we worked them out. So I like a progression like this. And it works pretty well for a beginner. So yeah, if you're a beginner out there, go check out that free beginner program. It's linked in the description below.
I know if I had, used that when I was first starting out weightlifting, I probably would have made a lot more progress, a lot quicker. Understood better. That was like a really confusing, like for me, like, okay, I understood how you progress strength lifts. Like that made sense to me pretty quickly. Same with like gaining muscle, like it kind of made sense a lot quicker. Yeah. And then when it came to more dynamic, more plyometric type stuff, it was really confusing. Well, how do you progress that? Like, same with Olympic lifts. Like, that's not a regular strength movement. It's like you got to do stuff a little bit differently. And I was pretty lost, right? Like, I didn't know what exactly the progression should look like. I didn't really know what the technique should look like either. So if I had a manual like the Weightlifting 101 guide, like that would have been very, very helpful back in my beginning stages.
Yeah. That's the tough part. I think a lot of coaches don't really know how to get a beginner program out to somebody, because like if you're coaching in person, you just kind of have your teaching progression, and then you solve a lot of the issues just by teaching. But like as far as putting a program together, it's a little bit tougher. That's why it took me so damn long to write it. It took me like a year to write this out, because it needed to be something that would work well for people who weren't getting watched by me all the time, and being able to fix it. So, it makes sense. And that's why it's a little bit longer, is for those people out there that don't have a coach that's watching every lift. But if you do pick up the program, you'll be able to join the Discord that we have, which you can also join without the program or whatever you want to do. But you can take take videos of your lifts and post them in the group, and we'll coach you for free. So, go do that if you're into weightlifting and you want to figure out how to get a little bit better at it.
Oh yeah.
Is that the pod?
I think that's it.
Sweet.
That's everything for this video. If you found it helpful, then please make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. You could subscribe to my channel, Big Ben Strength, and you should also subscribe to Calvin's channel at CalvinLackey81KG. And make sure to check out the link in the description below for all of our training programs. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye.